Sabrina. I am here with my bestie, Kathleen, and we are celebrating International Women's Day. Today is Sunday, March 8th. So go girl power, girl magic, and happy Women Across the World Day, and all that fun stuff. And we...
Yep.
We are yep, all that good stuff. And we are coming to you live from Kathleen's studio. So Kathleen is a stylist extraordinaire, and she's going to share more of her background, and we're going to talk about the intricate and exciting world of styling. So I'll let Kathleen take it away. What adjectives would you use to describe your world?
I mean, you did have the alliteration going, so there's that.
I do like a good alliteration moment.
The stressful and stupendous world of styling.
Okay, let's talk about it. So, stressful and stupendous, we'll come back to that. But first, share a bit about your world and your background. In the...
Wait, you were going to say how long we've known each other.
Right.
Or that it's
Cute
been
to that.
Since 7th grade. So
yes, so
just as just a little background.
7th grade, that was like 5 years ago because we're so young.
We're graduating high school. I'm a protege. I just started styling 9th grade. I've been doing it now 4 or 5 years. So
nice.
Just getting my toes wet. Yeah.
So
anyway, fast forward. 20 years or so.
Oh my gosh. And how long have you been styling?
That's a good question. I've been in the styling world, I guess, for the last 5 or so plus years.
Okay.
I worked in fashion industry and other facets now close to a decade. So styling specific has kind of gone back and forth for, I would say, 5 or 6 years. And now I work full-time as someone's first assistant. That's kind of an industry term for like their main lead full-time person. And yeah, so I've been doing that for almost 2 years now.
Okay.
And so, yeah, leading us up to March 8th, 2020. This is my current sitch.
So we're going to come back to a couple things. Stressful and stupendous, we're going to come back to, so let's bookmark that, as well as first assistant and like understanding the roles and structures within a stylist organization. So we'll bookmark that too.
It's marked.
Thank you. Don't forget.
It's in my history, my bookmarks.
Okay.
I was that weird computer joke. When you bookmark. Anyway.
Okay. So
that went over well.
So, okay, styling.
Yeah.
So, first, how did you get into styling?
So, by just like forcing my way into it.
Okay.
Just in general, just fashion has always been something I've loved, and I think we can all remember our background as kids growing up. That's always something we both have been interested in.
Ooh, and Kathleen, actually, do you know what I'm going to say next?
I think I do.
Fashion show, was it junior year or senior year of high school? Kathleen planned this curated, not just curated, an amazing scene in our fashion show.
Our high school had a fashion show that was... Yeah, it's something else.
And the theme was denim, like destructed denim.
Yep.
And you came up with a whole concept.
And we made like a ton of clothes.
We did.
Out of reworked stuff.
Yeah. But we were like literally getting scrappy, no pun intended.
Getting scrappy.
We literally like collected a whole bunch of denim and then...
I definitely like... fell behind in my work otherwise.
Make sure school,
that
not a priority at all, but destructing denim, that was like...
A lot of safety pins.
Patches, I think. Going around to Joann's Fabrics, all that fun stuff.
Just kind of collecting other classmates' things to kind of make, bathing suits out of denim. Things that are just like the most ridiculous.
At all. But that's how long you've been interested in
It's always been something I
world.
wanted to be involved with in some form. At the time, growing up, it wasn't something that I think I fully understood what a stylist was to be able to say that that's what I wanted to do. I think in the last now 10 years, it's really kind of blown up as something that people really are aware of, even if you're not in the industry. Whereas before, even though I like ate Vogue, for dinner and tried to always have magazines, in my life, I still didn't fully understand what that was. So I always thought I wanted to be a designer when I was younger. And then I ended up studying television production and doing things within that world for a while, but the fashion stuff was always there. And so it kind of was a long, leisurely road to get myself back to or really started in the styling world. But yeah, I'm coming up on 10 years living here. And
in New York City.
In New York, yes. Here, assuming you guys know where here is.
Actually, we're in Kathleen's closet.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
now.
Exactly. If only. This is the size of my apartment, basically.
That's New York living for you.
Yeah. So, came up here, worked in fashion in some way for a while, but not styling directly. And definitely I worked in restaurants and I did other things to kind of make ends meet. So it wasn't, some people kind of, I think it's a long road for some people regardless, or I shouldn't say some people, for all people there's a path and it's not immediate success. But mine has definitely sometimes felt a little more scenic and kind of to try to figure out what avenue works best for me. So finally, just through, I think, getting myself in a situation that I was around, not making any money, supplementing my income, but I was in a situation where I was around people as an internship in a company that I wanted to learn from. They then connected me with a stylist that they use for their collections. And that kind of really was the start of my styling, I guess, story.
Okay.
And from there, that was 8 years ago or so. And from there, it still has been kind of back and forth between different things, but definitely a really long learning process. But I felt like it was important to, you kind of have to be humble, / you very much have to be humble. You might be great in another area of your life, but in this, you're one of many and you're a newbie, so you have to kind of eat humble pie and do all of the unglamorous things. I still, do very unglamorous things 99% of the time.
So being passionate, being consistent, and just exhibiting perseverance, and then also networking are keys to navigating the journey within the styling world, and I'm sure the fashion world as a whole. Talk about how you mentioned Vogue, and studying fashion, so to speak, to keep your skill set relevant and current and what have you. How else do you or stylists as a whole ensure that you're staying current to what is present within fashion current day? And what does that mean? Is it following the trends?
Right.
Is it understanding what, if you're doing celeb styling, what are the hot celebs at the time that you need to be watching? Is it a matter of understanding where people are popping up and knowing the context that's driving fashion? What is important to being successful as a stylist and staying up to date?
As far as educating yourself and those kinds of things. It's all of the above, without sounding like it's a cop-out answer. It's having definitely probably a longer term understanding of photographers and stylists and editorials and different references over a long period of time. Sometimes that just comes obviously with living longer and having followed things for a long period of time, and then some of that comes from having to just deep dive into something where you go down a rabbit hole where you're like, oh, I just discovered this magazine or this photographer or whatever it is, and then you go on some journey, and now you have the internet obviously as a huge resource where you're on Pinterest, and then that goes down and another.
You use Pinterest as a reference?
Yes, a lot. I think it feels in some ways like a guilty pleasure, or I shouldn't say guilty pleasure, because a lot, I think, of fashion people use it to a certain degree at least, maybe some more than others, but I think the default is you hear a Pinterest, you think basic bitch kind of. I mean, come on, you think You think recipes, and you think baby showers, and like
weddings,
cutesy stuff, and like just, you know, I don't know, like very sweet kind of things. And that said, there is a lot of that, but then obviously Pinterest kind of curates to your tastes, and you can follow who you want to follow just like you could on Instagram. And so when you need to sometimes find certain images or whatever, it's a nice way to not only organize your photos and things you've saved as references. If you just kind of want to get your ideas going, I do have like a folder, whatever, board that's editorials, and just I have pictures of editorials that I
never would have put that together. So I recently found out that Pinterest is technically a search tool. Right? Yeah. Where many people think of it as like a social media platform, and it does serve that purpose as well, but the core function is to be a visual search tool at that. But I never put two and two together that like you being in this high profile industry would be using a platform like that. To your point, I typically think of it as like, everyday people. Right. And that's respectable too.
And it's definitely not by any means the main source or only source, but it is definitely a great resource. Yeah, it's a great way. So I use it kind of both for personal, like, inspo, whatever, as a reference, or a way for me to, like, make a wish list of things I want to buy, or, like, or if we have a new...
sounds like rabbit hole material right there.
Or, like, you know, you have a shoot you need to research, and you need to, like, look up a certain era. So I make a new folder of Pinterest things that I found on there, and then I might save those pictures to put in something that's in a bigger, like a Dropbox folder. Dropbox is a great, also, it could be better, but for what
it could be better, I agree.
There are definitely things that annoy me about it. That being said, it's a great resource for organizing also, you know, things that you need to constantly share and upload, and I know that it's definitely used by stylists in general. That said, as far as like educating yourself, you know, I think some of it comes just from like what you're interested in. So it's like general kind of keeping up. Like I think that's important to a certain degree, but then it's like,
and that's via magazines and Pinterest and social media and YouTube and like all the things.
Yeah, just the normal, like you're looking at the shows, you know, when the seasons are coming up, and reviewing them, and kind of staying current with that, and with what's going on as far as just within the business kind of world of fashion. That said, watching movies and doing things, or art museums, or things that aren't so directly related, I think can, I think especially when you become a stylist on your own and you're commissioned to do work, even if it doesn't seem like it's particularly creative, you're still kind of, without you realizing it, probably pulling on some those kinds of things
along the way.
Color palette or whatever the case is. So I think, and that makes you a little more, I think, unique and interesting than just being like, I'm inspired by this somebody else's collection that's like very obviously fashion. And you know, Instagram is also a great resource. I constantly you know, it's obviously is annoying in a lot of ways, but it you can really discover, as you know, as you can discover a lot of things on there, you really can discover a lot of brands on there. And so you know, whether a lot of things are suggested to you, or you might follow certain people and you might see somebody that they're tagged in, and you get exposed to a brand that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be you know, aware of, because for example, Vogue.com, it shows only about so many shows, you know, they only feature so many people, and so it's a great resource in that way as well.
So when you are, and I'm sure that this process varies all across the board, but just like, you know, give us an example of, you get commissioned for a project, right? How does that process generally look from start to finish in terms of like concept and ideation to...
Ideation? Is that a word?
Hello? Look it up, sister!
Oh, so I sound ignorant because I don't know what that word is? I mean, I can assume what it is, but...
Put that in your Pinterest search engine and see what comes up. Ideation. Concept and ideation. Until
that's
final product.
Marketing, I'm going to start using that in my work
yeah,
emails.
It's very chic. You might get the little squiggly line underneath, but it is a valid word, I promise.
Gmail's not up on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the first steps you're saying?
Yeah, just like process. Okay, so this project comes across your plate, and then what?
Right.
And again, I'm sure that it varies.
Sure. It projects for the different types of projects that are out there. There's a lot of different types of styling work, and then there's a lot of people work differently. But typically speaking, you're given whether it's a celebrity thing, whether it's for a brand or a campaign or a magazine editorial, you're definitely given kind of a brief.
Okay.
And that either comes from the brand itself, it comes from the creative team that's putting it together, it may come from the photographer itself, as far as sometimes you're kind of in on that process where the stylist would have a, not to say you wouldn't ever be a part of the process, but sometimes you have more of a say than others as far as that initial concept. But usually there is a kind of initial conversation of what their needs are and what they're thinking. And then they may have something kind of already developed, or you might be they might be asking for your kind of initial thoughts. Assuming you have kind of a brief already put together, one of the first things you would probably do is do a decent amount of research on the potential subject, depending on, again, what type of thing it is. That could vary. If it's a model, you might not need to do as much of research, just because they're a model. They're there to put on the clothes, whatever. It's not necessarily about their particular personality. But you definitely need to be aware of the background of that model and be aware of their sizing needs, as well as maybe any other needs they may have if they don't wear certain things, or if they need to be covered in a certain way. So there's very practical things to understand, and those things and parameters that you really have to be on your toes about. And then on top of that, there's the research that goes into if you're doing a shoot and a campaign with different athletes, and you need to understand what their style is on and off, the court, I don't know, and what their interests are. So not only is that going to help you in the conversation, it's going to probably inspire you to know what you might want to do with that person. So it kind of it's twofold. It's very practical, and it also gets your juices flowing. So you kind of want to be able, because you genuinely do have on-set and even off-set contact usually with these people. Yeah. So you want to not go in there blind. And,
you want to be researched as well as you can.
You want to feel like you can know a little bit about the person.
Can I interject?
Yes. I was done.
No, that's just the start of the process. We gotta work. But I'm curious to know, for when you're working with models, but maybe more so individuals styling, do they have a sense for what their personal style is? And again, I'm sure it varies. But so we're talking about on average, though. Do people just come into you blind and they're like, "Listen, I know I can't dress and I need some help," or they're like, "Oh, I'm very chic and I like warm tones and how
warm
well
tones.
Do I clearly I'm not a stylist. Yeah. How well do people have a sense for what their personal style and how accurate is it too? Because I feel like people's perceptions
that could be almost, I would say, ironically, that's kind of almost the trickiest part when people have they're
I'm just picturing someone coming in I know I look great in this, and you're like,
and it's maybe not
that.
Yeah. If someone knows, they can totally have opinions, and that you want somebody to have a perspective. Sure. But when it's a very skewed perspective, that can be tricky. It totally, without giving another default answer, it's it totally depends. So sometimes people kind of come in and are pretty open, and as far as I think this leads into something you had brought up before, as far as the questions you were throwing out there is, do people coming in like the individual styling world or celebrity styling world, do they come in and reach out for a stylist because they don't know how to style themselves or because it's more practical? And it's both. You know, some people have really, really, as you can imagine, like, you know, especially, you know, celebrities of a certain echelon, you know, Tracee Ellis Ross, amazing style on her own. She also has a stylist. You know, sometimes she might dress herself for events, but she also collaborates with a stylist because there's just also practical and logistical parts of it. Not only maybe the stylist will elevate her in certain ways, or expose her to things that she may not have known otherwise, but literally it is a full-time job depending on how often you're going to events.
Sure.
So just for the access, so Tracee Ellis Ross might know how to put on the style herself, but she may not have access to the PR and the time it takes to reach out to the brands right off the runway, all of those things that go along with it. Just as a very like straightforward way of thinking of it.
Yeah. That's a good example.
And then on top of it, you know, there are people that, you know, again, still might have opinions, but they're not quite there. And, you know, it can really run the gamut of where a person might land as far as what they think they know or do know about their own style.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Quick tangent.
No. Listen, you have to redirect me back to where we were.
Sorry, so we were talking about process for styling. So you get the brief, you do your research, then what? You like get sign off from the client on what you've researched, and then you start to collaborate on like what's next in terms of these are the pieces we want, or these are the designers we want to partner with, or like what is that next step in the process? On average.
Right. That is, you're leading in the right direction. I'm trying to think of an easy example because it definitely does depend on, as far as like the next steps, depends on what kind of process it is, or project it is rather. So you would probably do some research, and then from that research, as the assistant, for example, I would probably do a lot, maybe my boss might do a lot of research herself, but I might do a lot more in-depth research in one area, or to be able to kind of gather information to present to her. I'm basically like, stylists in general, you're kind of, you're curating things, right? At the end of the day, a lot of it is about siphoning out different things and kind of putting forth the best package. And so as usually the team, you have the first assistant, and then depending on the size of the project, you might have a bunch of assistants working on any one thing.
So primarily doing research at this point,
yeah.
Okay.
And you're kind of curating things for her to further curate, right? You're just you're making an edit, and they're editing further. And then they might give feedback and say like, great. Yes. No. You know, let's go further into this direction. You gave me 5 options for this. I like these 3.
Interesting.
And let's look into these more. And then there's probably a whole nother world inside those 3 things.
Interesting.
For whatever it is.
Okay.
That said, that lead stylist is probably then also she's kind of doing that part that the first assistant is probably managing, maybe amongst a group of assistants. And then she's also having conversations with the photographer and the production designer and the creative team in general, or whatever, around where they are in the process and where she is in the process. So we're probably constantly, we're making a lot of PDFs of you know, whatever concepts. Sometimes it starts off really vague. It's a mood board. Sometimes it gets really specific. And they kind of go on, say it's a 2-week process or whatever, however long the project is. And it eventually goes into a kind of a go period where you need to kind of like get the product.
And that's when you're out pounding the pavement, so to speak. Like going into showrooms or...
literally shopping, you know.
Shopping, yeah. Okay.
Depending on... if it's like a campaign for a brand, you can't really use other people's brands. Or you can sometimes, if there's like an agreement or a rental fee or something, but you can get into a lot of trouble if you use other people's brands for a campaign for someone else.
Like legal trouble.
Legal
or
trouble.
Just like a slap on the hand. Oh, okay.
No, like sued.
Okay.
You're like, oh, you rented that Gucci sweater and you did not get approval from Gucci, and it's a recognizable item from Gucci. So everything you're using for, a campaign for, I don't know, L'Oreal or something. It's just a random example, cosmetics company. You have to make sure that it is something that is unrecognizable in its own way.
Sure.
Maybe you get something custom made if it's not something you can find in the marketplace and shopping. Sometimes it is a rental thing, but then you have to maybe, only shoot it from a certain angle. And then it can also just be literally just shopping, like in-store product. And even the in-store product, you have to be careful about, obviously still, again, the branding.
It's a lot of considerations to take into account. And it sounds much more collaborative than I had realized in terms of not just like not just managing you all structure as a styling organization, but then also having continuous conversations with the photographer, like you said, or creative team or brand team or what have you.
Yeah. That's where the lead stylist, like a lot of their time ends up, I would say a good portion at least of their time gets taken up, is they're having those direct conversations and then they're kind of, I don't want to say the middleman because that sounds like low man on totem pole, but they're the hub. They're the hub. Yeah.
You can use that one too. Yes, that's my airline background. Oh my gosh.
Yep. So they're the hub, exactly.
All right, so I have another question. This is actually like off the cuff. But I know, so get ready. It's easy, but it's a little tricky maybe. So how often are you all like looking at the final product on social media and reading the comments? Because I'll be in them comment sections. And
you're like, it's not even my work.
I wonder
you're like, my feelings got hurt.
Right, my feelings got hurt. Or this was amazing. Right? It's like there's no gray area. It's like people love it or hate it. And so I always wonder for people who are like have contributed to those projects, are y'all in the comment section?
I'm sometimes in the comment section. It depends also how, at least for me, if it's a long time since I've done it, I feel like I've kind of removed myself from the
detached.
Like it's kind of done and I wrapped it up, and I still care.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, when it's something like certain projects are like a quick turnaround, it's still kind of like on your brain. So I might be quick to be like, oh, what did this tag?
Tap into that.
Let's see this thing. I mean, I think I don't happen to work on projects that are like, I don't know, they're not Beyonce, for example, where you're going to just get this crazy amount of like feedback. Not to say that it doesn't happen at all, but it is never that kind of like crazy fandom kind of situation that's usually so extreme that my feelings are like deeply hurt. I do find sometimes the mean comments are kind of funny just because they're usually like kind of off base. Like they're just,
most of the time.
Oh, that's trash, but it's like bad English somehow. Like it's somehow like, I'm like, is this a bot? Or I don't know. They're
well, again, good.
But like, also there's like, if it, every to each his own. Like, I guess it depends on like, I take those with a grain of salt because they're usually like fewer and farther between. But if it was everybody was blowing like them up as a bad thing or the project up as a bad thing, then maybe I would, I don't know, take it further. Never reads the comments.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're busy enough that you probably don't have time to be filtering through the comment section. So let's reverse back to
when you have time in your hand, that's when you can go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, but you mentioned stressful as one of the descriptors of the styling world. So what is it? What's like the number one factor that makes it stressful?
That's hard. Number one,
Dun, dun, dun.
I hate these kind of questions. Like, what animal what's your top favorite?
That is not at all apples to apples. Okay, top 3.
Thank you.
Give you some breathing room.
They're just a general thing that's true probably for a decent amount of industries. Definitely for the fashion one, is that everything is kind of like, just hurry up. There's a lot of deadlines. So there's projects that come up very last minute, and you're probably maybe juggling different things at different times, and there's always kind of a moving, maybe I'm using that wrong, but moving target. Mm-hmm. There's like, today there's a deadline, and then tomorrow there's another one for something like related to that. Like there's constantly like things to get to the end thing. You might have all, fittings, or you might need to like receive packages, and you're juggling a lot all at once. And so it's you have to really it's forced myself definitely to be a more organized person. So that's definitely something I still can work on, but
we all can.
That multitasking in general, just working under pressure, as much as it, at the end of the day, it is just fashion, there is still, depending, like if you're on a shoot day, there's a lot of, you maybe have one day or even a few hours, depending on what the project is, to kind of get things done, get the shot, whatever. You want to do this outside thing, and it's, the sunlight's only doing this for a certain amount of time, or say you're working with, somebody, a celebrity or a model or whatever, that's only available for 2 hours, or you need to stay on schedule. Like there's a lot of factors beyond just general expectations from your boss, and definitely just like the pressures of the job in general. So
lots of moving parts. Okay, that's one.
That actually,
it encapsulates everything, right?
I was going to say, like, we can just leave it at that one.
Give me all that pushback.
I didn't like the pressure.
No pressure. Okay, so I want to talk about trends in the industry, specifically sustainability, because I feel like that is the buzzword that keeps popping up, and for good reason. Because I think people are starting to get more responsible in terms of environmental impact that the industry has or has made, and ways to sort of progress going forward. How does that show up for you in your world, or does it? In terms of like, are you, being more open or more eager to work with, for example, brands that are sustainable,
sure,
or vegan, or you mentioned that models may have certain criteria. Maybe they don't wear leather.
Right.
I'm making this up. So, but does that show up for you? Okay.
No, that's a great example. So yeah, while we are not, as a stylist, you're not the brands themselves that are, creating the pieces that would maybe be more sustainable. I think it's just more as it should be, more in the conversation, and almost a little more expected. It's moved from like kind of being on the outskirts to
more
integral, and something that sometimes even the creative process, like what is asked of you is to be more mindful of those kinds of things. Sometimes it's also that you're just depending on your own perspective and your own wanting to kind of have a positive impact. You might want to consider certain brands a little more than other brands that maybe use recycled textiles or what have you, or stay away from fast fashion whenever you can.
I was going to ask about that specifically.
Or you might work with someone that a lot of shoots in general just definitely don't allow fur, only faux fur. And that's
something that phased out real quick.
I was gonna say, and that's not necessarily that's been around now for a while. But then you might have exactly a person you work with in whatever capacity that only wears certain things. And on top of that, I think you think about styling in general. You're bringing in clothing, say for a shoot, or if you're working with a celebrity, you're bringing in clothing samples from brands. Something small is thinking about it's not only, you know, maybe budgets are small, so you want to keep it local anyway because you don't want to pay for shipping, but also it's a sustainable act to try to not overnight ship something from Paris all the time, you know. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but to try to think about things like that, to try to work with not only maybe smaller brands, just regardless of maybe their completely sustainable actions or not, things like that, that you're not only working with staying local, smaller brands, and, you know, you obviously, you want to be mindful, you want to work with big brands too, but, you know, what are those big brands also doing? And also looking from the perspective of thinking about using vintage more. And then also...
These jeans are vintage.
Yeah, see? It's just,
I love vintage.
You know, again, something was on the outskirts that's now, like, it doesn't need to feel like it's like this... I only did that because I couldn't get something else kind of thing.
It's more part of the conversation.
Yeah. And or just from the perspective of, you know, people, I think for red carpet dressing, it's like, you don't wear something more than once, you know. Well, I think it was the BAFTAs, the British, I guess movie awards. There were, I know that, what's her name?
This is Jane Fonda, right?
No,
Helen Mirren.
Girl, no.
Sorry, I'm just throwing out names.
I mean, maybe they did something too. But
I think it was Jane Fonda.
Kate Middleton. She rewore a dress. I'm sure maybe a lot of it's not the first.
It's becoming a trend. To your point, more and more people are doing it,
and like making a real statement by doing it. So, or even if, you know, for example, with red carpet styling, you usually, if somebody else has worn something already, you don't. It's gonna be like, who wore it best? And that's so just like played like.
I know.
At the same time, you want to be mindful of it. If it was like this huge, you know, Lady Gaga award, for the Grammys, but at the same time, like to not think of things as kind of disposable at this one moment, this one appearance.
Yeah.
I think that kind of is important to kind of like think about things a little more differently, a little different.
And I'm trying to get better about that as well, because I think, especially when we were growing up, I think we had that mentality of like, well, there was no social media, but you also were just looking for ways or opportunities to shop. Cause you, or when there was an event.
You were shopping for an event. You weren't shopping for your life.
Yes, but there was always an event, and you use that as an opportunity to shop because you didn't want to repeat outfits, is what we would say. But now, I think that's evolved. Yeah. On top of the fact that we have social media and we get photographed a lot, but it's still okay. Right. And now responsible and respected to repeat things. And I feel like it gives folks an opportunity to get creative. To say like, okay, I wore this way on this occasion, but here's how I can remix it or style it differently or play around with it.
Yeah, when you're broke, it gives you a nice little segue. A segue to say like, yeah, I shop only at Beacons because, like something like that where it's like, I shop there because they have good things and it's like sustainable, but also I can't afford the thing right off the rack.
So there you all are. For all of y'all that are still looking for niches or opportunities to create your lane within fashion, Kathleen just gave you a brilliant idea. I now want to talk about cultural appropriation because that too is a major topic, at least from the consumer perspective. Is it as much from an industry insider perspective? Does that come up?
It does and it doesn't. I would say that I should say it does and it doesn't in my experience. I think depending if I was working for a brand only, it maybe would come up more in certain avenues. If I was a journalist, maybe it would come up a little more. I think there have definitely been situations that I've witnessed where somebody's like, yeah, no, we can't do that, or that might not be kosher, or let me double check that. Let me take the time. Even if it's not necessarily cultural appropriation, like there will be things where I have definitely had to take my time to say, like, does this thing that I think looks cool, says the creative director, does that mean anything otherwise? Because it could be used with just on a, like, just kind of, even though so many things are thought out, sometimes things also happen very quickly. And so it's like, let me take the time to Google this, even if it's, a 5-minute task. Yeah. And see, like, okay, what is this? What's the background of this image?
Better be safe than sorry.
And so in that way, it definitely comes up. there definitely, I think, as far as my concern and interest in cultural appropriation, there are definitely, I think, ways that it could be. I think it's gotten a lot better. I follow a fashion professor that kind of focuses on race and kind of in a sociology kind of perspective related to fashion. Yeah, her name's Kimberly Jenkins. I think she used to work at FIT, and now she works.
I think I've seen her name before. I think she's either lectured events at the FIT museum.
She's definitely done that quite a bit.
Okay.
Amongst, I'm sure, like a ton of other things.
Sure.
And she's been now appointed, I think, on boards for Gucci, and maybe other brands as well, as they direly need people.
It's good that they're recognizing that. I mean, they kind of had to learn it the hard way, but.
I mean, in that she shouldn't be, so singular, and she kind of is. Maybe there are other professors and educationers.
Academics? Now, that's not a word. Educationers. That would get the double red squiggly line.
There needs to be some more. I need an educationer.
Clearly, you said it, not me.
There definitely should be more across the board. That brands, they don't need to rely on one person, and maybe there are, and I'm just not necessarily aware of them. But it's a growing unfortunately field. Showing up out of necessity and instead of more of a preventative measure. So. It's not great, but there are definitely, I've seen things that have been done as far as conversations around them.
Well, it's good that there's an openness to having the conversation, or to your point, doing the extra research, even if it only is a
people
couple
in the
minutes.
room, and or
well, that's the other part,
and not having even the awareness of that there's not a person in the room. I think that's even almost just that really just lets it fly off the handle, I guess, in a way of saying
which is, yes, in 2020, it's surprising that there are still brands or institutions or companies that don't even have the awareness that they're lacking in diversity, and it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. It boggles my mind. But, I guess what that means is that there's only opportunity to improve.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. It has to happen. It should have already happened. Yeah. It should have never been a thing.
There's definitely a lot more. I mean, there's unfortunately a lot. I shouldn't say unfortunately. Unfortunately, there's improved diversity in front of the camera. Not completely where it needs to be, but behind the camera, it's a much really inching along.
Yeah.
Which that really needs some improvement.
It will.
And nurturing. Yeah.
Okay, last question. Fashion versus style. So
What are your thoughts?
Well, sips tea, actually really water.
Wish it was
spiked water. Yeah. Wishful thinking. It's Sunday afternoon. No, it's just water. Not that it's 5 o'clock somewhere. It doesn't even have to be 5 o'clock. It's daylight saving, so actually it's really an hour behind. What? I don't know. I'm all messed up.
I forgot. I luckily, didn't oversleep, but I did. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it was 1 o'clock. Then it was 3 o'clock. AM that is, because I was wide awake.
Oh no.
Oh yeah,
I only saw it this morning.
We don't want to talk about sleeping patterns. That's a whole.
I see your emails. She is burning the midnight oil.
Oh yeah, to say the least. I have been up since 11 p.m. last night.
What?
Yeah, I have serious insomnia. That's a different story, guys.
But you were asleep until 11, so you did sleep before that?
I took a nap before that. I fell asleep at 8. p.m. and woke up at 11 p.m.
Oh, so it's
and
about
I've
your
been up.
bedtime.
Yeah. I just downed some coffee, so I'm good at least for like the next hour. Okay, style versus fashion. So, I mean, this is going to be like such a layman's explanation, but I feel like fashion is more sort of keeping up with the latest and greatest trends as opposed to style, which, and the trends being industry driven, whereas style is more just how one expresses themselves through their clothing, which could have nothing to do with trends.
Yep.
It's just how about clothes are used to, as a form of self-expression.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that
was like my botched explanation, but yeah.
Totally along the same lines. I feel like style is not tangible and fashion is like a tangible thing.
I like that.
Yeah, like fashion is, you could say it's like the garment industry. It's like almost in one way you can look at it as that. You can say it also just equals like trends. As far as if someone is in fashion, or if you work in the fashion industry, it's really about like the physical like kind of products and keeping up. But as far as style, it's this like just innate thing that
I like that
a fashionable person could have. It has nothing to. I don't think in a way they have completely. They're not like interchangeable terms. Yeah. And style, I think, is also completely much bigger than just clothing.
Correct. Yeah. It's like it's personality, it's character, it's energy.
The steez.
The steez?
Yeah, steez. You're like
style
your vibe.
Steez.
Yeah. Steez is not even like that's not even a cool term anymore either. Like
Stilo. Remember that?
Yeah.
Talking about yeah. So we just had a full circle moment because we brought it back to 702, which I think that album came out in high school, and that's how we open up this conversation.
Look at you trying to wrap it up.
Full circle, baby. Yes, sips water.
Okay.
Kathleen's
closet. Well, just was trying to do a little alliteration.
Again, full circle, bringing it back to the alliteration. Yep. So, 7th grade, high school fashion shows, 702 stilo style, alliteration, tons of full circle moments.
These are the hashtags that she's going to be adding after this video.
Follow these hashtags that don't make a whole lot of sense. And also, don't forget to celebrate International Women's Day. Thank you, my favorite woman.
Love you.
I love you. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you learned a lot about the wonderful world of styling. Tune in next time. Bye, guys.